Does the NFL preseason actually mean anything? The preseason is our first taste of NFL action after a long offseason, so as a fan, I love the fact that it exists. The question remains, though, that the preseason is not always going to be an indicator of how good a team will be. So, does it actually serve a purpose beyond getting depth charts set and putting football on the screen? Today, I'm going to go through the preseason records of the past few seasons, looking at how the undefeated preseason teams ended up doing in the regular season, as well as how the best teams in the regular season ended up doing in the preseason. So starting off with the most recent year, 2024, this is last season and last preseason, we had the undefeateds being the New York Jets, the Tennessee Titans, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Denver Broncos, and the Minnesota Vikings. You can see their records on screen, but I think it's notable that 3 of the 5 teams in this list actually ended up with very bad records. The Jaguars ended 4-13, the Titans ended 3-14, and the Jets ended 5-12. Now the Jets were set to pick top 10, the Titans obviously picked first, and the Jaguars were set to pick top 5 and ended up picking at number 2 after their trade with the Browns. But 3 of those 5 undefeated preseason teams ended up with really bad regular season records. And 2 of them obviously a little bit of outliers with the Broncos and Vikings. I think every year we're going to see that where some teams that do well in the preseason end up doing well in the regular season, whether that's because they're going up against bad teams in the preseason or they just, defeat the odds and actually turn out well. But the record of the Jets, Titans, and Jaguars in the regular season this past year is really what got my gears turning on this. And truly, if I'm being honest, Elijah, my co-host's gears turning. He gave me this idea for a video and I decided to take it and run with it. And the other 2 that I have listed here, the Eagles and Chiefs, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles and the Super Bowl losers of the Kansas City Chiefs. The Eagles had a preseason record of 2-1, and the Chiefs were actually 0-3 in the preseason, but still made the Super Bowl after a 15-2 regular season. Moving back to 2023, we had just 3 undefeated teams, the Steelers, Jaguars, and Commanders. The Steelers ended up going 10-7 in the regular season, the Jaguars went 9-8, and the Washington Commanders went 4-13. And this is the season where the Commanders picked second overall, took Jaden Daniels. So again, we have a team picking very early that was undefeated in the preseason. Then we look at the Super Bowl of that year. We had the Super Bowl champion Chiefs going 2-1 in the preseason, and the Super Bowl losing 49ers going 1-2 in the preseason. We move on to 2022, where we have a few more undefeated teams in the preseason, starting off with the Jets, who went 7-10 in the regular season, the Ravens, who went 10-7 in the regular season, the Steelers went 9-8, the Texans went 3-13. This was when they picked second and took CJ Stroud and then traded up to 3 and picked Will Anderson. The Raiders, who went 4-0 in the preseason. They won the Hall of Fame game and then ended up winning their other 3 preseason games as well. And they ended up going 6-11 in the regular season. And then the Bears went 3-0 in the preseason just to go 3-14 and land the first overall pick before obviously trading it to the Panthers. Then we look at the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs going 2-1 in the regular season, and the Super Bowl losing Philadelphia Eagles going 1-2 in the preseason. Then back to 2021, which is the last year I will look at, and I'll get to that reason in a second, but we had several undefeated teams, with the Patriots going 3-0 in the preseason and going 10-7 in the regular season, but we also know that that team was coached up so well, and the actual roster was much worse than this regular season record. Then we also had the Bills going 3-0, just to go 11-6 in the regular season, another solid outcome. The Jets, it's a weird one. They tied in the preseason, so they went 2-0-1, and then in the regular season they went 4-13. Again, a bottom-tier team, picked top 5, I believe, that year. And then we had the Cleveland Browns, Baltimore Ravens, and Indianapolis Colts. The Browns and Ravens ended up going 8-9 in the regular season. The Colts went 9-8. And then the last 2 AFC West teams, the Broncos and Chiefs, went 3-0 in the preseason, just to go 7-10 for the Broncos and 12-5 for the Chiefs in the regular season. Then we see the Rams, the Super Bowl champion Rams, went 0-3 in the preseason, did not win a preseason game, and ended up going 12-5 and winning the Super Bowl over the Super Bowl losing Cincinnati Bengals, who went 1-2 in the preseason and went 10-7 in the regular season. That's a lot of stats, and I did say I was going to end it at 2021, which is what I'm going to do. And I think it's a nice, concise case study into the topic, and I'd like to end it there for a few reasons. There was no preseason held in 2020 because of COVID, so I'd be jumping back a year to 2019, and right before the 2021 preseason was when the NFL expanded the regular season to 17 games, shortening the preseason schedule down to 3 games per team. This gives us some interesting data that brought a few things to mind for me. Number one, In none of these past 4 seasons has either of the Super Bowl teams been undefeated in the preseason. Every single one has lost a game, and the combined record of all Super Bowl competitors, all 8 teams from all 4 years, is just 9-15. They've lost more than they have won, meaning I don't think preseason success is a true indicator of who will truly be good in a season. Number 2. Another thing to note is that of the 22 undefeated teams over the past 4 years, 6 teams have ended up with top 5 picks, with at least one preseason undefeated team landing a top 5 pick each of the past 4 seasons, which I think is pretty notable. And this could very well be coincidence, both of those things, but there's another reason I didn't want to dive too deeply into the preseason history, which is the last thing I'll talk about. Over the past few seasons, we've seen it become more and more popular for teams to rest their starters for most or all of the preseason. This is different from the past, where we saw the preseason get treated as a ramp up to regular season action, at least in the start of preseason games. You would typically have your starters out there for quarter 1, and then you'd bench them for quarters 2, 3, and 4 and see your depth after that. But you would at least play some of your starters. The change was made, I guess, to keep the best players healthy. They may play a drive or 2, but most of the time it's the people fighting for a roster spot that get playing time. If you do have starters out on the field, you either don't know who your starter is going to be, or you are a team that is an anomaly, like the Chiefs, where they actually do play their starters, and it's not normal to see that anymore. But most of the time, it's people fighting for a roster spot that get the playing time, maybe the bottom 10 roster spots. Those are the players we typically see play the hardest, and so that's what coaches want to see, which is understandable. But this brings me to my grand reveal. The teams that have the most question marks among their starters are more likely to play their starters, while the teams with established good players are more concerned about the battle of the backups. This preseason, we're seeing this in teams like the Colts and Saints that will trot out quarterbacks at the top of the depth chart to get preseason reps because there's no solid answer to the debate of who will actually be the starter. This means you have starting caliber players going up against third stringers from other teams, so the worst teams will actually likely perform better. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Saints and Colts do fairly well in the preseason this year. Yes, the Colts have already lost a game, but I believe that they will both be bottom 10 teams in the regular season. The same could be said for the Browns and Giants, though the veterans, Joe Flacco and Russell Wilson, likely won't touch the field in the preseason, so the best regular season options may remain on the bench. And even though the Colts lost their first preseason game, we can see this theory happen in real time, with the Colts starting Anthony Richardson, just obviously for him to get hurt, and then Daniel Jones comes in after the injury, another starting option, and then Riley Leonard, a rookie, to finish off the game. Compare that to their opponents, the Ravens, who started Cooper Rush and benched him after the first 3 drives after just a few passes for Devin Leary, a 6th rounder from a year ago who then played the rest of the game. This stark contrast in who plays, who actually gets the snaps, shows the difference between a team at the top of the league like the Ravens and somebody who's going to be a bottom feeder like the Colts. Going back to my earlier point, I'd like to know if this trend of good preseason teams picking early in the draft will stay true this year, and I'm curious to know which team you think could go undefeated in the preseason but pick top 5 in the draft. And I'm also curious to know if you think a team that does particularly poorly in the preseason will be a legitimate competitor and contender for the Super Bowl. The Lions lost the Hall of Fame game, so they're obviously starting off a little rough. They got blown out by the Chargers, but I don't think that means anything. I'm not concerned for the Lions. I don't think most people are. It's just an interesting thing to think about where you see the Lions get blown out and it's kind of a jarring like, whoa, the Lions just got blown out by the Chargers. I mean, the Chargers are a fine team, but that just happened. And realistically, the Lions didn't play any of their starters. So it's reasonable to assume that the Chargers, who had Trey Lance as a backup quarterback, and he's actually shown promise and has potential. I know people have been saying that since he got drafted, but bear with me. It's a little bit of a show that the Chargers backups may be a little bit better than the Lions backups, but it doesn't really show you which team's starters are genuinely better. That's about all I've got for you today. If you'd like me to go further back, I could take on all of the 2010s, so 2010 to 2019, in a similar style video to show the evolution of preseason from that period to this one. I'd be more than willing to do that, and if you agree, disagree, or have additional thoughts on the preseason as a whole, definitely drop them down in the comments below. But like I said, that is all I have for you guys, and with all of that, I will say, deuces.